Now, the French know a thing or two about making family-friendly 7-seat vehicles, and for quite some significant time this segment of the market was dominated by MPVs from Citroen, Renault and Peugeot. Now, as time has moved on, well, manufacturers have shifted more towards SUV body shapes for their 7-seat vehicles, and pretty much every manufacturer now offers some kind of 7-seat SUV within their lineup. Citroen, however, well, they've decided to stick with the MPV in the form of this car, the Citroen Grand C4 SpaceTourer. And while it is an MPV, it's an MPV that's slightly different from the rest. It's not the big box that you're probably expecting. It's actually quite a funky car that's got some really nice styling touches to it. In this Need to Know video, we're going to find out if this MPV can still cut it for family life, and if it's still the best thing for you if you want practicality and 7 seats. We're also going to find out which version of this vehicle will be best for you if you're in the market. Citroen is well known for its MPV offerings. Not only has it produced everyday versions of its commercial vehicles like the Berlingo Multispace or eSpaceTourer, it's also produced more car-like alternatives such as the C4 Picasso or the Grand C4 SpaceTourer. Now, usually an MPV is a big box on wheels designed to maximise the space inside so that occupants have the most available room for themselves and any luggage they'd like to bring along for the journey. Citroen, however, has managed to wrap all this practicality up in a package that brings a bit of French flair and funky design. The Grand C4 SpaceTourer that we're looking at today ran from 2018 to 2022 and essentially took over from where the second generation Grand C4 Picasso left off. Visually, there's not a great deal of difference between the two models. This car did the same job as its predecessor in being a flexible 7-seater which was cheap to buy and run but didn't look boring. There's decent tech levels too, all of which was quite the departure from the very first generation Grand Picasso. Now, if you're a car manufacturer and you're looking to make a multi-person vehicle or MPV, the first job is to make it as spacious as possible, which in a lot of cases compromises how it actually looks. It's one of the reasons many rival offerings take the form of a commercial vehicle with a couple of added rows of seats inside. The Grand C4 SpaceTourer is surprisingly stylish though. You get these futuristic lights at the front, and the A-pillar has been brought forward to soften the somewhat boxy shape you inevitably get in an MPV. There are also some nice touches dotted around the exterior to give it a bit more flair and help it stand out from the crowd. I think there are few MPVs which can compete with this car on looks. What do you think of the styling? Let us know in the comments below. It should be no surprise that the Grand C4 SpaceTourer is a spacious place to be inside. I am just over 6'1" and it's not difficult for me to get comfortable in this car. I've got plenty of space around me and I think that I would be perfectly happy to spend quite some time behind the wheel. That is helped by the first thing I'll mention, which is the amount of glass you get inside this car. There is glass everywhere. You've got a huge windscreen, and when you move the sun visors, that extends the screen even further. So it's a very, very light, airy place to be, and you've got these very helpful windows here by the A-pillars. In terms of fit and finish and build quality, well, it's a mixed bag, as you'd probably expect. Up on the top here, you've got some nice soft touch plastics, also where you would rest your arm as well. That's nice and comfortable, but start to look below that level and it is hard wearing, scratchy plastics. But I would argue that's actually what you want in a family car that is going to be, let's say, run through the mill of family life. When it comes to the displays, well, there's been a bit of a strange decision here, which is that Citroen have moved the speedo and the main screen away from being in front of the driver, and they've placed it here in the center. And I will say the graphics on it look incredibly dated. It has not stood up to more modern vehicles. So if you are expecting a very modern interior, that's not what you're going to get. But there is a certain amount of charm involved in the interior of this car. There's another screen down here that can be utilized for your climate controls, and while it's not a modern looking setup, you do have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. There are cubby holes and storage spaces located around the entirety of the cabin. Under this little screen here, you've got a little second glove box, I suppose you could say, and inside you have got USB connectivity in there. You've got some cup holders down the front here. They are a bit shallow, so if you've got tall drinks, I would be wary. And then some extra storage space here behind the gear lever. These seats are really quite comfortable actually. I like the individual armrest. It's a really nice touch. It's very adjustable. You can get comfortable, and we've also got some electronic adjustment to these seats as well. Whichever age SpaceTourer you choose, there are 3 trim levels to choose from. In earlier models, you have Touch, Feel and Flair. Touch being the base model, which gives you air conditioning, electronic windows and a 7-inch touchscreen. Upgrade to Feel and you get sat-nav and parking sensors. And top of the range is Flair. With Flair, you will get an electronic tailgate and reversing camera. In slightly later versions, the model names were changed to Live, Sense and Shine. The only difference being that the base model now got a 12-inch touchscreen. Onto the back seats. Well, back here, it's no surprise, there's plenty of room for passengers and lots of practical features too. Let's start with the seats, where you get 3 individual chairs in the second row of the Grand SpaceTourer, and there's plenty of knee room. I am just over 6'1". This seat is in my driving position, so I am quite comfortable as someone who's relatively tall sat behind a relatively tall driver. So I think it's going to be highly unlikely that passengers are going to be uncomfortable or lacking for space in the back of the Grand SpaceTourer. In the second row, we have 3 individual seats. They are all on sliders, so they can be moved backwards and forwards. A little button there underneath the seat. They also all have ISOFIX points as well, so you could fit 3 child seats in the back of the car, and the doors open nice and wide to make getting those bulky seats in and out very straightforward. There are some other practical features back here as well. So you get a table, just like you're on an airplane. You get some netting for loose items, and you also get these integrated blinds for blocking out the sun when it's like today and it's one of those rare sunny days. The huge panoramic sunroof that we've got at the top here really helps to elevate the light levels inside the cabin. I think that generally with 7-seat MPVs, they can feel like quite dark places, and that is not the case in this car. There is glass absolutely everywhere, so it feels like a real bright and airy cabin regardless of where you're sat. Now, one of the benefits of the MPV body shape versus a SUV for 7 seats is it's actually a more usable space in the third row because of that boxy van-like shape. What I will say is, compared to many 7-seat SUVs that I've sat in the back of, I have a lot more leg room actually, and these seats are in a position that I think is feasible for an adult to sit in behind another adult driving. So for me in the back here, I would actually have leg room. The seat itself is quite comfortable. The issue where I'm struggling is that even with the MPV body shape, at my height, I cannot sit up straight. It's just physically impossible. But I think for smaller adults, for teenagers, for children, it's actually a really usable space, and I think you could spend a long journey in this third row of seats. Obviously that means you've got practically no boot space, so if you were going to take 7 people on a long journey somewhere, you'd need a roof box to go on top to carry your luggage. But in terms of outright space, it's really not that bad in the back. As you would expect with an MPV, boot space is not an issue. Inside the Grand C4 SpaceTourer, with the middle row pushed to its furthest forward setting, you have nearly 800 litres of space, which is absolutely huge. As this is a huge vehicle with a huge boot, it's worth giving the boot a good look over just to see if there's any telltale signs of heavy usage. Because of the space on offer, there's every chance that there could have been dogs in and out of the back of here. There could have been multiple tip runs going on that have caused damage to the rear seats or scuff marks. I mean, it may even been used as a commercial vehicle as well, given the huge amount of space that's on offer. In terms of usability, well, it's easier to stop items rolling around when you've got those middle row of seats pulled back towards you. There's not really lashing points. There's kind of 2 lashing points there at the back and at the front here, but there's no netting to stop loose items rolling around, so that may be a slight issue. But overall, it's a huge huge space for you to stick plenty of luggage on board and head off on your road trips with the family. Now, there are some things in life that are certain. One of those certainties is that Citroen makes comfortable cars, and the Grand C4 SpaceTourer is certainly one of those cars. It's a very, very comfortable place to be. The seats are very comfy. It's very nicely cushioned as it kind of wafts along the roads. Around town, it's actually surprisingly easy to drive and maneuver for a car of this size. It's really helped by these A-pillars here. So when you're coming off and on roundabouts or peering round junctions, you get lots of visibility. So there's just tons of glass all the way around. So visibility is great. So it makes driving in town and parking actually not as difficult as you think it would be for a big boxy car. Now, the steering is, as I said, quite light. It does firm up actually at speed, but it's not what you would call confidence inspiring. This is not a car for chucking down country lanes. This is a car for loading people and things and heading off on a trip somewhere or doing the school run. And honestly, it's really equally suited to either of those tasks. Now, as you'd probably expect from a car that is best suited to long distance journeys with people and luggage on board, there are a good range of diesel options in the Grand SpaceTourer. There are some 1.6 litre units and a 1.5 litre unit, which is what I'm in today, and I think that this 1.5 HDI diesel that's got 128 brake horsepower is probably the pick of the bunch. The 1.6, you've got two versions. You've got one that's only 99 horsepower, and that to me just seems far too underpowered, to be honest. There is also a 2 litre HDI, and that is offered only with an automatic gearbox, and that is the highest powered of all the diesel units. But if you don't want to drive an auto, then that is not something for you to consider. Now, there is also, believe it or not, a 1.2 litre petrol engine in the Grand C4 SpaceTourer. Yes, 1.2 litre petrol. Now, that may seem grossly underpowered, but in reality, if you're just using the SpaceTourer as a school run car, you know, taking the kids to football training or popping them to school and nipping to the shops, then the 1.2 litre engine's fine. It's fine for those jobs. If you're going to have the car fully loaded with people and luggage and head off on a road trip or a holiday, then no, that 1.2 litre petrol is not the right choice. You're far better off with one of the diesels. As I mentioned, that 2 litre HDI comes with only an auto box. An auto box is optional on the 1.2 litre petrol and also the 1.5 litre diesels. Now, the auto box can be a little bit ponderous, shall we say, so it's always best to test drive the car, make sure that the gearbox is smooth, the changes up and down are going as they should be, and just confirm that you can get along with it, because for some people it's a bit Marmite, the gearbox, potentially. Especially in some of those older models. I know the EAT6, for example, is the one that some people have slight issues with. I think the EAT8 gearbox is just a much better option, I think. If what you want from your SpaceTourer is just outright economy, then definitely look at this 1.5 Blue HDI diesel. It's the best bet for outright economy. Outside of the gearbox, well, it's a case of just checking the usual things you would check. The SpaceTourer is a relatively reliable model, actually, so there shouldn't be any major things to look out for. It's just those standard checks that you would do when looking at a used vehicle. So obviously make sure that all of the electronic stuff works. So this has got a powered tailgate, make sure that the powered tailgate works. Make sure that your climate controls work, the infotainment system. This has got Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, make sure that the phone can connect to those. If you've got electric adjustment on the seats, make sure that works. So it's just all the standard stuff that you would expect, because this car is a family bus at the end of the day, so it is going to be used for family life. And if you have children, well, you will know that children aren't necessarily the most careful occupants of a car. So have a good look around, make sure there's no damage anywhere, make sure all the cubbies, like all the little door bins and all that things, those kind of things, make sure they open properly and close properly. And yeah, do all that, find one without any issues, and you're going to find yourself with a very, very comfortable, practical family car. I really quite like this, you know. You'd think a 1.5 litre diesel MPV, but you know what? It's just very comfortable. It's very light and airy, and it's just a very nice place to be. The Citroen Grand C4 SpaceTourer is quite a unique proposition, offering what it does, which is practicality, spaciousness, wrapped up in a very funky package. It's also cheap to buy and cheap to run too. If you've watched this video and you thought, you know what, this is the car for me, well, which particular one should you get? I'd say in terms of engines, the 1.5 Blue HDI diesel really is the sweet spot of the range. It offers everything you want from a diesel engine. It's economical and it's got more than enough power to transport you and your family around. If you're not going to be doing long journeys and you're predominantly going to be doing those shorter journeys around town, maybe the school run, then honestly that 1.2 litre petrol engine really is fine for those purposes. In terms of trim levels, it's pretty straightforward. Don't go for the base spec. Go for middle or top spec and you will find a car that has all the equipment you really need. If you've enjoyed this video, then please give us a like. Let us know in the comment section below. Would you be considering this car, or would you be opting for something maybe like the Ford S-Max or a VW Touran? Please remember to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so that you are notified every time we release a new video.